real change. So our final speaker of today in this session about scale is someone who is all about real change, and that's Ron Shaich, and he is the CEO, founder, and chairman of Panera Bread, a place where I have spent a lot of time with my teenage boys, back and forth from soccer trips. And he is very passionate about nutrition and societal change. And he definitely believes that a focus on wellness can help us fix a broken system. So Ron, can you come and tell us?
Sure. Thank you. All right, so where is this? So this session has essentially been about change. I've been sitting here listening. Everybody's talking about change. How does change happen? What makes change? I got a provocative thought to throw at you, something I've been learning, which is the most powerful way, the most powerful path to change is through the marketplace. Let me share with you my story. I think many of you know it, but I'll just quickly share with you what Panera is. It's nearly 2,000 bakery cafes, 80,000 employees, 46 states, $4.5 billion in sales, $5 billion market cap, and maybe most importantly to this story, about 12 million customers a week. I like to say about 3% of America is in a Panera every single week. Okay, so let me share with you something else, because it all comes from this. This is a stock performance, right? This is Panera's performance over the last 15 years. The stock's been up 4,000%. The S&P 500's been up about 40%. You can see us compared to Buffalo Wild Wings, Chipotle, Starbucks. We've been at the lead. It's enabled certain things. It's enabled us to be able to have these discussions. But in order to understand where we're going and how change occurs, I have to share with you where it comes from, why Panera succeeded, because as Stan said, it has to be organic. It has to be organic from who you are and what you are. If all it is bolted on, it actually doesn't amount to much. It certainly doesn't in the organization, and it certainly doesn't amount to real change. So Panera succeeded first because we've come for 30 years from a position that we have to serve food you respect. That's been at the core of what's driven this success. Secondly, we believe that the people that work in our cafe are very much a part of the totality of the experience. If they don't have self-respect, if they can't communicate that self-respect, the whole thesis falls apart. And then third, engaging environments. The environments are what engage people, and that's part of the Panera story. Taken together, it's about making a difference in a community. And I think one of the things that's so interesting to me in this world of technology is the degree to which community actually matters and matters even more. Where do people come together? Where do they talk? And most importantly, and I think it's a very personal statement because I came from a political background, I came from a place where I got into business to make a difference. Panera's really succeeded because it's been able to make a difference in the lives of people. And no business ever succeeds if it ultimately doesn't. And that's been the thesis of it, and it roots this discussion I want to have about change. Okay, so let me share with you something else. Let's drill down one level deeper into it. We have a history of delivering better food. What does that mean? For us, 30 years ago, it started with the bread. It started with artisan bread. It started with real bread, stone deck ovens, no preservatives, no chemicals, real stuff. From there, it flowed into salads, and it's flowed into soups, and it flowed into sandwiches. You can just see some of the kinds of soups that we're doing. But here's where it got very interesting for us, and let's talk about it. All right? I want to talk about our experiences with antibiotic-free chicken, because as a guy who started with one store, it's an amazing story to me, and it talks to me about how change actually happens. 11 years ago, we had an interest, and we had an interest first and foremost in doing real chicken. And if you're in the restaurant industry, most of what you get is somehow processed. And I can only tell you as a consumer, as a person, I knew the difference between the commercial stuff and the real stuff. And I wanted the real stuff. And I'm sure many of you understand what I mean when I say that. And we began to see it. We ran into some people. And we began to see this chicken product that was raised without antibiotics. And I wasn't sure we understood it at that point. We began to. And we began to say, do we want to take a shot at doing chicken raised without antibiotics? It seemed it was better chicken. It also seemed it was better for people. It seemed clear what the public health issues were with antibiotics as you learn more and more. And it seemed like this is the way we make a contribution to people's lives. Now, when we began to think about this 11 years ago, people said we were crazy because it would cost significantly more. That's always the argument against doing anything. At that point in our little world, it was $2 or $3 a pound more. on a product that's $4 or $5, that's a lot of money. The reality was people said we were crazy. They were right. We were crazy. How are we going to pay for this? You know, we got shareholders. We got people who work in these stores that are partners in it. You got franchisees. You got all these constituencies. And as my predecessors can speak to, in a multi-constituency organization, it reverts to the mean. At any rate, here's what we found out. We took that chicken and we rolled it out. And the reality is that consumers responded to it. And this was the most interesting thing to me. They responded to the taste of the chicken. They responded to the fact that it was real. But most importantly, they actually were ahead of the market. They actually understood that antibiotic-free chicken was better for you. And it began to spread. It was very interesting to me. 6 months after we're into it, we have Chipotle. They come along. We start taking the white meat. They take the dark meat. We're splitting the bird. No, seriously, that's straight up, right? Right? I didn't know it. The suppliers were doing well with this until Steve and I started talking. At any rate, then we turned it around on the suppliers. But it's going to it gets to the story, right? The important point is the consumer responded to it. And so what began to happen? We began to see the costs began to come down. Because as the demand picked up, just fundamental economics, you began to see those costs come down. And in some substantive kinds of ways. What ended up happening? You began to see them come down over the course of a decade. Where today, the ante in the food business is to have antibiotic-free chicken. It amazes me, you know, as a guy running a pissant little company in St. Louis, Missouri, to have today Chick-fil-A announce they're going antibiotic-free chicken blows me away. The one that really got me was 4 weeks ago, McDonald's announced they're going antibiotic-free chicken. I mean, we tamed the golden arches. You know, like it's great, you know? Yeah, you love to tweak these guys, right? And it's like, wow, they're following us, right? But here's the big one. You now have the producers going antibiotic-free. You have Tyson and Purdue, who in the last 4 weeks have announced they are going to be producing antibiotic-free chicken. So what's the lesson in all this? How does it happen? Here's the reality. Here's what I learned from our experiences with antibiotic-free chicken. Really simply, if there is demand, retailers respond. That's the nature of what being a retailer is. They respond to demand. If the retailers begin to act, and if there really is demand, the marketplace itself evolves. The marketplace literally evolves, and the whole supply system begins to adjust. And ultimately, the economics change. And that's really where change occurs. That's how change occurs. When people see it in their self-interest to do it, they act on it, and that's how things scale up. Okay, so what does it mean? The fact is that in our anti-regulatory environment, you may agree or disagree, you may have a political view of it or not, but the reality is there is no political lobby that supports massive regulation in this society. When nobody wants the food police, the marketplace may be the best way to change. It may be the most powerful way to affect how people eat and how we consume the food that we want to eat. And you need to keep thinking about that because you want to participate in the marketplace. You want to help move the marketplace because when you do, you can actually affect the kind of change that guys like me grew up dreaming of being able to make a difference with. Okay, so let's go on. All right, well, let's take our experience with ABF chicken and let me share with you how it energized us and led us to take a number of actions. Because when you start to take change, the people that get affected are not just the people that are the recipient of the change, but also the people that are making the change. And it began to give us credibility internally. It began to give us the power to begin to take change. It began to build an organization within Panera, within all of its constituencies, that wanted this, that wanted more of it, and began to see the power of it. So what happened for us next? Right? We began to raise the bar on a number of other products. We expanded our ABF proteins, and today we're now offering ABF roasted turkey. We're now using antibiotic-free ham, antibiotic-free breakfast sausage, and antibiotic-free bacon across all of our proteins. That couldn't have happened if we hadn't had that initial success, and it couldn't happen if there wasn't the marketplace response. What else? We began to change a whole bunch of different ways in which we think about food. 8 years ago, we voluntarily removed non-naturally occurring trans fats from our food. People thought we were crazy. It's the way you make food. Right? It's in everything. It's in every baked good. It's in every commercial product that you find these trans fats. You don't have to be a brain scientist to know that trans fats aren't good for you. Now, 8 years later, the food industry is readying for a federal ban expected to be unveiled in the next few weeks relative to non-naturally occurring trans fats. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about menu boards and posting calories on menu boards. 5 years ago, there was a whole big issue in my industry, right? The federal government wanted to regulate and put caloric information on the menu board. And I'd sit there and say, what's wrong with that? Aren't we in the business of building trust with consumers? Don't we want them to actually know what's in our food and make good decisions? And let me tell you something. If you're embarrassed about what's in your food, don't hide it, change it. I mean, it seems pretty logical, right? But my industry wanted to fight it, and I couldn't understand it. So I said, to hell with them. Let's put it up. That was 5 years ago, right? For 5 years, you've been able to walk into a Panera. 20% of the people adjust what they eat based on it. 80% don't. And you know what? It didn't have any harm, but it began to give voice, I think, to a movement in this country that said, you know what? It's okay. It's actually okay to do it. You know, today, we're in a place where on December 1st, 2015, our entire industry, any restaurant chain with 20 or more locations, will be posting caloric information. Because we built a consensus that this was actually something that was not only not bad, but was probably good for each individual business. It was good for the industry. Okay, so let me share with you something. Along the way, we came to realize, and I'll tell you this, right, how truly broken our food system is. I think it's one of the 4 or 5 most fundamentally problematic systems within our global society, the food system. In particular, I want to talk about something, and I want to say it, the negative impact our heavily processed, standard American diet is having on this country and its people. You don't have to look very far to read the statistics. The reality is America is unquestionably sicker than ever before. You know it. The reality is, right, just look at the obesity statistics. You know, you can look at this, I don't know if you can see it, but you can look at the lighter colors on your left. Right? That's basically under 15% obesity back in 1994. Go to 2010 on the far right. Right? You basically have over a quarter of the society that's obese, that's clinically obese. Diabetes, which is at the core of Alzheimer's, it's at the core of cardiovascular disease. Go back to 94, you look at diabetes, less than 5%. All right? We're talking about in 2010, nearly 10%, doubled. The reality is we are at the first time in our history in which our children are expected to live lives shorter than their parents. And I have 2 young children. I have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old. It affects all of us. This is real stuff. This is the reality that we live in. And as a human being, as a person that's part of it, what do I want to do? Right? So that's how we affect it. We think about it. Let me share with you something else which makes it complicated. Consumers are increasingly conflicted about what they should eat and what they want to eat. Because anytime there's lots of information out there, there's lots of people pulling in many different ways. And we live in a world where we know what we should eat. We hear it over and over and over. We're not sure how that fits against what we want to eat. We're not sure how to carry it on. And as somebody in the food business, I feel like food should be joyful. Food should be part of what I want my life to be about. Food shouldn't be something that I'm in conflict with and I'm always concerned about. You know, I think that the point is, no one can deny that we're at a point when our relationship with food needs to be addressed. And very personally, as a business person who feeds more than 10 million people each week, I certainly feel the desire to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it's a very core personal question you need to ask business people. Are they the problem or are they part of the solution? Because ultimately, we have to ask that of ourselves individually. And that's part of where change comes from. You know, the standard I begin to think about is first my relationship with myself. You know, 3 years ago, I began to realize the way I was eating didn't make sense. I had grown up, my mother had a heart attack 20 years ago. I went to a cardiologist. I went on a diet that was low fat. I basically became a pastavarian. You know, that is vegetarians, you know, pastavarians. We eat a lot of pasta, right? I mean, it wasn't meat, it was good, okay? And I realized that wasn't serving me. And I began to eat differently, and I began to read differently. I began to learn a calorie is not a calorie. There's good fats and bad fats. There's good proteins and bad proteins. As the CEO of Panera, I can tell you there are good carbs and bad carbs. And you need to understand that. And you need to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your own body? How do you want to treat your own body? How do you relate to food? What do you want to do with your guests? So I want to be very clear. You have to push the question to the leadership of businesses in a personal way. Because ultimately, we're not in business to simply extract profit. We have no profit if we don't make a difference in the communities. There's no communities left. And that's ultimately the challenge that we have. Let me share with you something else, which is ultimately the standard that I use. I got 2 kids. That's my son who's 16, my daughter who's 11. They're in a Panera 5 to 10 times a week. And how do I want them to eat? Forget me. What do I want to serve them? What kind of food do I want to serve them? Isn't that ultimately the question for all of this? Right? What do we want to do with our own bodies? What do I want to do with our own kids? What do we want to do with our own society? It's a very simple question. And I want to share with you something. If it's what I want to serve my own kids, what do I want to serve my own customers? It's the same thing. And if you simplify it down to that, you get something. So let me share with you where we're at. In 2014, we announced our food policy. What is that for us? We're committed to clean ingredients. I'll talk about that in a second. We're committed to a transparent menu, as much transparency as we can get. And then third, we're committed, as we have been, to a positive impact through nutrition and social action. Last year I came and talked to you about Panera Cares. I won't go through it, but that was part of where it took form for us. What does clean food mean? What does it mean? No artificial sweeteners. What else? No artificial colors. What else? No artificial flavors. And finally, no artificial preservatives. I think basically it starts with a view that complete transparency is the key to it, and ultimately it needs to present itself as food as it should be. No, it's true. So in 2015, a month ago, we announced our no-no list. What's our no-no list? It's a list of 150 ingredients that you will not find in Panera. It's meant to be transparent. It's meant to be all-inclusive. It's meant to be a line in the sand. It's sort of a good housekeeping seal of approval. It's such that you can walk into a Panera and you don't have to worry about what you're getting. You don't have to worry about what's in it. Let me just quickly mention, to do that, I'm not a scientist. This is another debate we always get into. Right? We're not scientists, and we're not going to engage in the scientific debate. I can't tell you whether this individual ingredient is going to kill you with cancer in 2 weeks or it's not going to affect you. I don't actually know the answer. But here's what I do know. There's a lot of people a lot smarter than me out there, and everything I've ever learned, I can triangularize the data. We went to the National Resources Defense Council. We went to the Environmental Working Group. We went to Johns Hopkins, their Council for a Livable Future. We talked to people that knew. And we said, what's the conventional thinking? How do you bring it together? Simply put, all reasonable observers agree. Simple and less processed food is better. It isn't complicated. Right? It's just simple and less processed food is better. A pantry as close to the one you have at home is a good thing. And then third, clean tastes better. I went down to taste some of the stuff as we began to pull these ingredients out, and I can tell you what that was all about. But I remember going through it, right? And I remember tasting the salad. And everybody said to me, don't expect it to taste any different. I was blown away. I had a different mouthfeel. Right? You'd be surprised when you get all this junk out of the food, what it tastes like. And it's not that people were bad, they just didn't know how to fix it. The reason this stuff was in the food was 30 years ago, they were trying to extend the shelf life. 30 years ago, they were trying to manufacture in ways that they had more efficiency. So they put chemicals in, they put processors in, dough conditioners. 30 years ago, consistency mattered. We wanted to have the same shapes. And so today, it got in the system. Nobody knew how to take it out. And what it meant for us in order to take it out, it meant we had to really go back to our suppliers, and we had to find out why it was there. And they often didn't know. We had to go back to their suppliers, and we had to really address not just the ingredients, but we had to adjust the processing specs and also the shelf life. Okay. So I want to share with this short video. This will talk to you about, it's about a 1-minute video.
Hydroquinone. These aren't real words.
Azocarbonamide.
Meat?
Azocarbonamide?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Wow. That's one word?
Dimethylpolysiloxane.
Dimethyl polysiloxane?
What are those? Are these ingredients?
This is what's in food.
I think the idea is if you can't recognize it or pronounce it, it shouldn't be something you eat.
If you ask your waiter, like, oh, like, can you leave the butylated hydroxynasyl out of my food? They're gonna be like, I don't even know what that is.
Okay. My point is only to say this, right? This isn't complicated stuff. If you can simplify it down to what you want to do with your own body, if you can simplify it down to what you want to do with your own kids, you understand what the good policy is, generally. Right? Here's my point, and I want to bring it together and close it. We've been amazed at the industry reaction. We announced this now in 14. We activated it in 2015, right? 4 weeks ago, a day and a half after we announced it, a company in Denver, Noodles & Company, they announced they were going to go to clean food. You know, a week after that, Taco Bell, of all things, announced they were going to clean food. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know what they're going to do with those electric yellow taco shells, but they say they're going to do it. I don't know if there's anybody here from Taco Bell, but it only took them 24 hours to walk back just a bit. Right? Pizza Hut, the next day, announced they were going to clean food. Right? And this is one, Papa John's Pizza. And it was very impressive to me. They announced that they already had 57 of the 150 ingredients Panera announced they were taking out. Right? And then, amazing to me, Subway announced they were going to go to clean food. Here's my point, and here's what I'm trying to say. Right? This stuff does matter, and this stuff begins to create a change reaction. Let me share with you just a little bit about Panera. Right? What are we doing? Where do we go from here? We're rolling out new products with an eye towards nutrition. Doesn't stop with that. We've got to keep going. What else are we doing? We're taking all of our flatbreads and we're putting 15 grams of whole grain in them because we have to actually do what we say, and there's no more powerful demonstration of that than our own core product, which is bread. And then finally, we're really in a mode of helping people have real, no baloney optionality, which is offering them curated menus. You should have the opportunity to have a menu for how you eat. I got guys on my senior team that eat paleo. Right? I myself am closer to a vegan. Right? Why can't I have a different menu than you? And in a world in which technology exists and we can make it all, why can't we serve you up a menu you want? Right? Just some of what we've begun to think about internally. But here's my point. Right? You know, Panera, right? It cannot do it. I would be naive to say we're changing in some core way, fundamentally ourselves. We're changing in some core way the way America eats. I'd like to think we're part of that. And I'd like to think that the way we're part of that is creating a chain reaction. So let me conclude with this comment, and here is my point, right, at the very core. If you want better food, if you want change, demand it. Demand it of the marketplace. And I would say to you in the core, shop at those retailers that offer it, those retailers that choose to offer it. Because ultimately, the marketplace does respond. It's the most powerful way to get real change, and you will be part of the change we all seek. Thank you.